If you were going to movies in the early 70s, then you are definitely going to be aware of a small film called Billy Jack. This is an independent film that is probably one of the most successful independent films ever made. It's an action drama, and this is the second in a series of 4 films that centered on the main character called Billy Jack. The original movie was called Born Losers in 1967. In the fall of 1969, filming began on this classic in Prescott, Arizona. But the movie wasn't completed until 1971. American International Pictures was initially the company that was funding the film, but they halted production after they pulled out of the filming. 20th Century Fox then came forward and filming eventually resumed, but they didn't want to distribute the film. That's when Warner Brothers stepped forward. The story revolves around the title character, Billy Jack, who's kind of a half-breed American Navajo that's also a Green Beret Vietnam veteran and an expert at the martial arts. He ends up defending the hippie-themed Freedom School and the students that go there because they're constantly tortured by the townspeople who just don't understand their counterculture and their way of life. The school's director is Jean Roberts, played by Dolores Taylor, who is in real life the wife of Billy Jack, Tom Laughlin. The movie is considered to be on the very cutting edge at the time that it was released, and it's still a cult favorite, if nothing else for the 70s era hippie cheesiness, not to mention the ironic fact that a pacifist loner constantly kicks butt in order to spread his message of peace. The Billy Jack character was actually introduced in the 1967 film Born Losers. Tom Laughlin had already had the basic outline for the script of Billy Jack the movie, but he just didn't have the funding because the studios just simply weren't interested in a film about peace and love, and also the plight of the American Indian. What the investors were interested in were violent outlaw motorcycle gang movies. So Laughlin just quickly dashed off a script based on a 1964 incident with some of the Hells Angels in Monterey, California. And he titled this film The Born Losers. And that earned him enough money for him to begin working on this pet project of his. Billy Jack was re-released in 1973 after a 1971 attempt was halted by legal wrangling. The way films were normally released in that day and age is that they would be released in one downtown theater in major cities on the initial release date and then eventually moved to smaller theaters in the suburbs. Tom Laughlin tried a different approach to this. He had 1,200 prints of his movie made and opened it in 1,200 different sized theaters across the U.S. Just doing this allowed so many people to see this film at once that it increased the word-of-mouth buzz that went along with it. And Billy Jack, with its $800,000 budget, earned $40 million in its first year of release. Now, the famous confrontation in the ice cream shop that just completely drove Billy Jack berserk is based somewhat on a true occurrence that happened to Dolores Taylor. This incident happened while she was growing up in a small South Dakota reservation town. She was one of a handful of Caucasians who lived in the area. Her native playmates called her Little Yellowhead as a child. She saw the poor way that these Indian kids were treated, and it had a huge impact on her life, and later on her husband's life. So the scene where the flour gets dumped on the kids' heads in the soda fountain is based partially on true experiences that happened in her life. One of the many iconic scenes in the movie is where Billy forces Bernard to drive his brand new $6,000 Corvette into the lake. I know that seems crazy, saying that $6,000 is a pricey automobile, but it was at the time. David Roya, who played the character, was behind the wheel in that scene, and he gunned the engine when director Laughlin set action. After he was retrieved from the water, he was confronted by actor Bert Freed, who played his father in the film. He came up to him and started yelling, "Are you crazy? Why the hell did you do that?" Roya at first thought that he was just being paternal and concerned about his safety. As the actor went on with his tirade, it later developed that Freed was the vice president of the Screen Actors Guild and was furious because a union stuntman should have been hired to drive the car into the water. Now, if some of the actors in the film seem a little bit stiff and woody, well, there's a reason for that. And that's because that the majority of them weren't professional performers, but rather friends of the Laughlin family. The young blonde girl named Carol, who sang the uplifting song, "My Brother's Dead," was played by Tom and Dolores' daughter, Teresa. The headband girl, who got floured in the ice cream shop, was portrayed by Debbie Schock, who was the Laughlin's babysitter. And Julie Webb, who played the runaway with hepatitis, Barbara, was a high school pal of Debbie Schock's. And like we've already said before, Jean, the leading lady who ran the Freedom School, was reluctantly played by Tom's wife. She didn't want to do this movie. She was completely against her being cast in this role. But I tell you what, she is one of the high spots in this film. And to think that she wasn't a trained actor with a whole bunch of time under her belt, it's pretty amazing the job that she did in the film. The original actress that they had cast for the film just all of a sudden quit, and she really didn't have a choice but to step up to the plate and take on the role. Despite her insecurities, her work was praised by numerous people. Tom Laughlin was a longtime student of the martial arts, and he performed many of his own fighting moves in the movie. But in probably the most famous move that he makes is the scene where he tells the sheriff that he's going to put his foot on the side of his head, and there's nothing he can do about it. He did have to use a stunt double on this because he just was not that accurate. So he ended up using his teacher, Master Bong Soo Han. Laughlin was really able to perform the kick in question, but just not with the precision necessary to stop his foot just millimeters from actor Bert Freed's face. Just before shooting on the picture began, several of the cast members tried to convince Tom Laughlin not to wear his black hat that had the Indian headband on it. They said that they thought it looked kind of silly, but Laughlin fought back with them, and he wore it anyway. And this is one of the trademarks of the film and made the Billy Jack character so iconic. Now, the beginning and the end of the film stands out so much in my mind because of the title song, 110 Soldier. This just sears it into your memory. And so when you hear this song done on the radio, it immediately takes you back to that movie theater that you first watched Billy Jack in. This song was recorded by the band Coven and was not written specifically for the film. Now, the actor David Roya, who played Bernard Posner, unsuccessfully sued Tom Laughlin for $250,000 once the film had been released and had turned into a runaway hit. He claimed that his role had a great deal to do with the film's performance and that he, in this character, had been defrauded. He ended up losing his case in court. Now, it's said that Marlon Brando loved some of the scenes in this film, especially Dolores Taylor's post-assault scene. He considered this one of the best acting jobs that he'd ever seen. And it's also said that John Travolta, after seeing this movie and watching that same scene, made him choose to be an actor. Okay, so that's pretty good company to be in. John Travolta's a great actor, and he loved the film. Marlon Brando loved the film, especially that scene that was so moving. But there's one other person that stands out more than anybody that absolutely loved this movie and saw it about 9 times that they knew of, and that was Elvis Presley. This was a film that he was hooked on and would constantly rent out theaters in Memphis so that he could rewatch it. He would watch it in the middle of the night at this theater, who was known for accommodating Presley with his passion for specific movies. He and the Memphis Mafia got their fill of Billy Jack. Now, if you want to go back in time for just a second, go back and watch Billy Jack. You can see it on Amazon Prime and probably some other locations. But it'll sure bring back a lot of memories, and I think it's a really fun watch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.